What's going on, my Patreon family? So today I'm working with another pair of shoes, another popular model, the Air Force One Low in all white. Here you guys can see that I'm mixing some paint up, and I'm going to be showing you guys some tips and tricks on how to make some cartoon kicks today. First thing that I wanted to show you guys is how to actually transition to certain colors. Today I'll be working with the Alpha Flex Electro Blue by Alpha 6 Paint. I'll also be working with the Electro Yellow by Alpha 6. This is also called Alpha Acrylic Paint. It's a neon yellow color. And then lastly, I'll be working with GAC 900 to do the sock liner and anything soft. As you guys could see, this is kind of like a teal Tiffany color. And the goal isn't to have this should be a Tiffany color in the end. It's going to actually be a nice, bright, popping blue color. But what I like to do is I'm going to share with you guys a trick where I first lay down the base coat and make sure that the base coat has some kind of neon colors to it besides just blue. All right. So today I'm working with a couple of different highlighter colors. The first color being electro blue, the second color being electro yellow. And when I mix both of these guys together, I end up getting this kind of a Tiffany-ish, greenish blue color. So that's what's coming out of the airbrush right now. What I did notice is that blues and purples, for whatever reason, they have a difficult time being nice and consistent when you're laying them by hand. So I prefer to do them by airbrush. You can see here now the blue is kind of starting to take over. And as I get further and further into this custom, you guys will see us go from a Tiffany blue to a beautiful electro blue that's popping. All right, so with that said, let's jump into the next part of the tutorial. Now I'm working on the outside of the actual shoe. As you guys can see, as I laid down on the swoosh here, this nice soft layer of blue, I'm not pressing on the airbrush too hard. I'm not trying to soak the whole shoe up. It's literally just a nice soft mist, and it should feel a little bit soothing for you guys to see this shoe go from just an all white and then gradually into this turquoise color and then eventually the blue. But here I just wanted to point out to you guys, you don't see me rushing. I'm just chilling, just taking my time, and I'm starting to fill in this first layer as well as I can and as consistently as I can. That's a big thing here. I'm laying out blues and purples again. You want to try to lay them out as nice and full and as consistent as possible, and then that way you won't have any dark spots, because that's what happens when you don't lay out these layers nice and consistent. You'll start to get blotchy and darker spots, especially with blue and purple. So let's jump to the next part of the tutorial, and you guys can see here that we've gone from like just a teal now to a turquoise. The reason I'm using this today is because I want to make a nice soft sock liner, and anything else that has to do with, soft materials and fabrics. You want to use GAC 900, so then that way you don't have like a very stiff sock liner when everything is said and done. It's a very simple process on how to use this. Firstly, you have to mix this guy here, GAC 900, with your paint 50-50. So it should be half and half, all right? When I mixed these guys in today, the electro blue and electro yellow, I put that in my airbrush here. You can see it kind of looks like a Tiffany blue almost, but it's more on the poppy side, meaning it because we have this electro yellow, this highlighter yellow, it has a very nice vibrance to it. Okay, one of the things that I like to do whenever I'm working with shoes like this, today's shoes, I'm trying to get them to look like a cartoon version in blue. That's what the request was. I've already taped off the soles using sole tape, so basically the entire top is going to be blue. Now you're probably wondering, well, that's not exactly blue. It's like more of a Tiffany blue. So what I wanted to share with you guys today is, obviously I mixed 50-50. This is paint and the GAC 900. And what I like to do when I want to get like a nice popping kind of a color, what I like to do is first add this kind of a Tiffany blue base. The reason I add that first is because, again, this highlighter yellow, it's a very, very nice base to add underneath almost any color that is bright. And when I tell you guys that it does kind of change the color, obviously you can see it's Tiffany blue. But what I will end up doing after this is dried, I'm going to hit it with another layer. And that layer I'm going to start hitting with just light coats of only the electro blue. So we'll start to get back into the blue family. Right now we're kind of in between, we're teetering between a green and a blue family. She wanted all blue cartoon customs. So I got to get this back over to the blue side. Now, I'll give you another example. Like if I was working on making an all red shoe, I wouldn't add this yellow necessarily. I would probably go for something more closer to this family here, which is like an electro pink. And then there's even an electro red. So just, somewhere in that same color family of red, I would add a neon version of it. And then I would start to hit it with the first couple of layers, real light layers, get the actual fabrics saturated. You can see here, see how saturated I've gotten the fabrics there. And I'm also hitting this guy right here as well. So this is kind of like a fabric feel to it. Anything that feels soft to you guys, for example, like Jordan 11 Concords, the top half have this kind of a mesh feel to it. Anything that's soft, like shoelaces, anything that sucks in the paint like this, usually is like a soft fabric material. If you want to keep it nice and soft after everything is said and done, this is the key. And I think a lot of people usually don't read the instructions as much as we used to, but all it says is mix one part of this to one part of this paint, and then it says allow to dry completely. All right, so that means don't hit it with heat, in between coats. It's saying let it dry completely, and then heat set it as follows. So we're not going to iron it for 3 to 5 minutes, right, with medium heat. Uh, there's a heat press. We're not going to use a heat press because we're not doing like t-shirts, right? We could technically throw them in a clothes dryer for 30 to 40 minutes on high, but you don't want to melt your shoes, right? Because who knows, nowadays some of these shoes aren't all leather. So what we usually do is we use a heat gun. And so it says here again, it says hit it with heat for about 3 to 5 minutes. So I would recommend once this is completely dry, you will feel it when it's dry because it'll have this it'll have a dry texture. You won't feel any paint coming off of you, but it'll still feel kind of like spongy and then rough at the same time. It has a very unique kind of a texture to it. Right now it's wet, so when you're pressing on it, um, let's see right here, this is how you can kind of test it. It's kind of getting into that phase of it's drying, and right before this phase when it was actually wet, it's got a very sticky texture to it. So if you are hitting this correctly, you want to hit it with light layers, let it kind of air dry for 5 minutes, hit it with another light layer, let it air dry, and then eventually I would say about 3 or 4 coats in, you'll get to this point where you can see that the color is fully immersed. This was an all white Air Force One, so just for reference, and you can see now we're basically at that turquoise phase. I'm going to move now from away from this green family, and once I have these nicely saturated, I'm going to just add the electro blue completely by itself. Here is you can see how watery that is. It's supposed to be very watery because it's supposed to soak into the fabric. So it's really important that if you're putting in more paint, which I'm going to be doing right now, so you all saw how much I just put in there. Now I'm going to have to put about an equal part of GAC 900 because you want to keep that nice watery fluid kind of almost like a dye is what we're creating here when you mix GAC 900 with paint. So you got to keep a good watery consistency. And you can see here now as I dive into my next layer here, it's a little bit more blue. All right, Sean, now we can finally get to the fun part. I've got the base completely finished up, and now I'm starting to actually add detail into the shoe. First thing I look for is how can I start to really look at the contouring of the actual shoe. You can see here, like, for example, I'm on the bottom here, starting to paint a little bit underneath and then on the side, and trying to figure out how will they come together seamlessly. Usually here I'm using a darker coat, so that's why you can see that it's a little bit darker on the bottom here. And I will start to get shades and shades lighter as I continue to go on the inside of the shoe. Right. So again, looking for another corner here, looking for an edge. And as I find the edge, I'm literally trying to go with that same exact flow of that same edge there and get the same contour here. So this is just Sapphire Paint by Angelus. Again, this is the darkest paint that I'm using today, and I'm using this just to get all of the edges and coats. Now I'm about 3 coats in on this sapphire, and you can see a real big difference between the base coat and the actual coats that I just started painting here, right? This is really like the two different coats. We're looking at the lightest coat here and we're looking at the darkest coat here at the same time. Okay, so next step here is we got to continue to fill in more layers. But how do you fill in more layers where you can actually see the layers? What I'll be doing next here is I'll be adding both sapphire and the electro blue together because I'm trying to get a coat that's like right in between these two colors. So let's get into that next. In this section, I'm adding just finishing highlights and looking for spots that I could make this look a little bit more animated and cartoonish. I noticed that I hadn't done anything to the sole here, so adding some detail into the sole with some light gray is a must. Adding different shades on the white sole, I look to just start to animate a little bit more of the sole so it kind of matches the top end. If I don't do that, then it just looks like it's cartoonish on the top, and then on the bottom it just looks like a regular, sole. So that kind of defeats the purpose. So you guys can see here I'm using paint. I did mix GAC 200 as well. GAC 200 helps with more like rubber and hard surfaces to stick a little bit better. And honestly, this part of the tutorial is just kind of extra. I know a lot of people won't spend the time to do the bottom sole, but I'm going to show you guys how to do the bottom sole next anyways, just because it's a popular question and a lot of people ask, how do you do it? So let's jump into that next. There's a lot of different ways that you can probably do the bottom of these soles, but what I learned was the fastest way to do them is to use a Sharpie. So a lot of people don't use this trick, or maybe they don't even know about this trick. But if you could find fine tip Sharpies like I'm using here, they're really easily available at the Dollar Tree for like $1 for 2 of them. I usually get about 2 or 3 of them just to make sure that I have fresh ink all the way through. Now, you got to make sure, and this is the biggest thing, is once it's all done, make sure you lock it in. I use Liquid Kicks scratch protected sealer, and that will lock in the actual black ink there. All right, y'all, here's my favorite part. Here is the finished product for you guys to see. Don't forget to leave me some comments. Let me know how I did on this tutorial. Hopefully you guys learned something new, how to make some cartoon souls, how to make the cartoon animated look all together. I'm going to catch you guys real soon, y'all. Peace.